Football is a sport that has been a big part of my life and is something that I've always wanted to get myself involved in at some point. Being involved in the sport has enabled me to meet some incredible people and has been a safe place for me to get my mind off perhaps things from work and even from school. But as someone who is on the spectrum, I've always had my difficult moments in the sports as well, from being seen as an outsider to not fitting in and to not fitting the norms of what is expected in society. Despite this, I want to look further into what more can be done to improve the experiences of people on the spectrum within football. I think from early on in my life, football has been, a big part of, everything that we sort of did as a family, but it was also a sport that sort of brought everyone together, if that makes sense, because my dad was into football growing up, so was my uncles, and so was my brothers as well. When we was growing up, we was really into football, and football was something that sort of brought us together really, and it's one of these sports that really engages with people and is a sport that I really wanted to get involved in, and having played football for a bit and having had experiences with playing football growing up wasn't always the most positive of experiences for me personally, because you're getting called names, being called disabled on the pitch, obviously that sort of hurts a person's sort of confidence. One of my very first football sessions really, and just my brother was sort of being praised for how wonderful he is in goal and everything, because obviously he's got a bit more training experience than I have in football, whereas for me, I've never really been part of organised football or even done any sort of training sessions beforehand. This is when I was around age 7, and obviously they were telling me how rubbish that was and things like that, and that will hurt your confidence already, but you're getting called disabled, this and that, and it really hurt me a lot really, and it really hurt my self-confidence, self-esteem growing up, and when you're in that sort of space, it does make you feel a bit lonely sometimes, and I wonder in terms of these sort of experiences, how I would cope, being called names, and that sort of things that sort of you carry as you grow older. And one of the things that people don't understand, especially to those who are on the spectrum, is how these words, these comments, getting laughed at does to people. Even though I enjoy going to the football on a regular basis and having the opportunity to meet like-minded supporters and new people on a regular basis, this experience can often be overwhelming on occasions, as you're having to often fit in a tight space. This is something that I wanted to look into further, and with clubs opening up sensory rooms across the country, I went to Brentford to see what they were doing to improve the matchday experience of those on the spectrum. I am here outside the GTEC Community Stadium here in Brentford to learn a bit more about their sensory room that they've got at the stadium. One of the few teams to have a sensory room at their stadium, so it'll be interesting to learn a bit more about their sensory room. How much capacity does it hold for each person using it, how big it is, and to learn a bit more about how this all came about in the first place, particularly for those who will be experiences sensory issues at matches, and it'll be interesting to learn a bit more about how they're making this space at the ground more and more inclusive.
Yeah, so the sensory room was an idea that we launched when we first built the GTEC here. Obviously, when we were building it, we had some companies that we were in contact with, some really good charity organisations. So when we designed the room, we got a lot of guidance and instruction from local charities. Obviously, the room was quite bare, but the reason we done that is because we didn't want it to be overstimulating for any kids with autism when they came into the room. So it is quite bare, but the reason for that is so we don't want anyone to be overstimulated when they come in here. Obviously, we've got soundproof windows here, so it's a lot quieter, calming environment for the kids and families that come in here. Obviously, on a match day, we normally have about 4 families that come in here. So we normally have up to 14 people within this room, which is really good. And some of the experiences that the kids have had in here have been brilliant. And we have some really good case studies where kids have now ended up sitting in the Stadio Bowl because of the experience here they've had in the sensory room.
And why do you think the club sort of came up with this sensory room in the first place? What was it in particular about bringing a sensory room that sort of enticed the football club, if that makes sense?
So at Brentford, inclusivity is at the heart of everything we do here, and we want to be an inclusive football club. So when we started the sensory room and we seen the idea go around with Sunderland, who first started it, it was a no-brainer for us, and it was something that we were there like we have to do and want to do, because we want this stadium and to be one of the most inclusive football clubs in the country.
And what an experience to be outside the stadium and to learn a bit more about their sensory room. I think rooms like this are very, very important to making the game more and more inclusive for people on the spectrum. And it's really nice to see clubs like this really take a note on how they can be more and more inclusive, because inclusivity is important in terms of not only bringing fans to the grounds, but also making sure that fans come back, and the experiences that they're going to be, you know, here at the ground will be all the better for having sensory room like this. And not only will this benefit not only the children or the young adults looking to use the sensory room, but it will also lift a huge burden off the families as well, because it means that everybody can be able to join in with the crowd and to be able to enjoy the game of football that we all love. And more of these spaces needs to be included in stadiums, and they're doing positive steps in terms of not only being able for this to be open on match days, but to also looking to have plans to bring in the community as well. I think is very important as well. And I think it is also very important as well that people can be able to come here and have a safe space where they can just be themselves. And we shouldn't have to go to a football match pretending to be something that we're not. In order to get a better understanding of how autism has an effect on everyday lives, I spoke to a UK psychologist who has a specialist area in both autism and in sport as well, and how the two sort of merge together.
I think that's a really good question. I think it mirrors an increase in awareness just more generally, in the general population over the past few years. There's a way to go in sport, particularly in football. It's great that players are coming out and sharing that, but I guess perhaps some players, if they do have a diagnosis or they're being assessed or they're wondering they perhaps have autistic traits, I wonder if there is some reluctance on their part, because I guess how that might be viewed. And we know in football, any sort of difference can be used against people. But yeah, it is interesting that people are starting to feel more able to come out and share that. And I think that's a really, really positive step for reducing the stigma, but also increasing awareness that there's autistic people everywhere in all walks of life, in all spaces, in all jobs. And that's really, really important, particularly for young people who may be autistic, who enjoy playing football, who may go into it as a career, to see people like them represented, at high levels, and who are able to speak out and share their experiences. I think that's probably inspirational for them.
When I first started this documentary, I wanted to sort of look into the relationship between autism and football, because it was something that was not really spoken about enough in the world of media, and something that was pretty much a taboo subject in the world of sports journalism, but also in media in general. But what I've learned throughout my time sort of filming all of this was that there is a need to be able to spread awareness about, autism in football, people who are on the spectrum, to talk about their experiences, to be able to take lessons from, what they've experienced at football grounds, because it's still a subject that people don't really understand, but it's also a subject that people don't have a lot of information from. And it's something that I wanted to sort of get into, learn a bit more about. And going into Brentford, speaking about my own experiences, it certainly helped to be able to get off my chest some of the things that have been bothering me throughout my time, and hopefully other people can relate to that too. Hopefully people can take lessons to it. But the biggest thing that I've learned is the importance of raising awareness and highlighting the good that people are doing to combat this and to really tackle the issue head on. And what Brentford are doing, what other clubs are doing in this area is really good. It's a start, but I think a lot more needs to be done to be able to experience football without any limitations, and to not let their experiences on being on the spectrum, and also let their personal experiences in terms of, you know, being discriminated against because of it, really hold them back. And I really hope that people can take lessons from this, that people can start conversations in relation to this. And I really hope that people can do the best they can to be able to raise this information further and further, so that we can have more research, so that people can take an interest in this, and so that we can learn from each other. Because at the end of the day, human beings, we learn best when we learn from each other. And I really hope I've been able to do this with this documentary, and I really hope that people take a further interest in this as a result.